Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this webinar number 9 in our MedTech Innovator Asia Pacific Accelerator webinar series. And welcome to those of you joining us on YouTube. My name is Frederick Nyberg. I'm the Managing Director at MedTech Innovator based here in Singapore. We are the world's largest accelerator of startups in medical devices, digital health, and IVD. And as part of our accelerator program, we provide weekly webinars on a broad range of topics. Today's topic is cybersecurity and data privacy. We are hosting these webinars every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Singapore time. The first 60 minutes will be live streamed on YouTube. That will be followed by 30 minutes of closed-door Q&A with our cohort. So next week is, in fact, our last webinar of the series. The topic then will be commercialization, managing KOL networks, sales and distribution. So please do join us then. And with that very brief introduction, I will hand over to MedTech Innovator CEO Paul Grant.
Hey, thank you very much, Frederick. So as you heard Frederick saying, we're going to be talking about a topic today that is very important for any of you who are in the medtech space, and that is cybersecurity and data privacy. Our job here is to make sure you're educated so that you don't get tripped up later on, so that there's something that you've left and said, hey, typically you might say, oh, well, this is something I'll deal with later. Then you go to the market and you find out you can't access a customer because you haven't addressed something, for example, in this case, cybersecurity and data privacy. And it's something that we want to make sure we're arming you with the knowledge you need to have. So I'm really excited about this topic. It's one that has been growing in terms of importance over the last several years. Healthcare has been way behind the curve when it comes to cybersecurity. A lot of the other industries that weren't paper-based recently have gotten way out ahead of us. And now that everything is electronic, we're finally all here, and we're falling victim to cybersecurity problems. You've probably read about a lot of these. They've been well publicized. The ransomware attacks are for real. It's not just about stealing someone's credit card. You know, this is real serious stuff where it can impact patient care. And that is something that it's not just about being ransomed. It's about people not being able to access their healthcare. So there's a lot of issues here we'll talk about. I'm really excited about today's panelists. We've got 3 experts who are going to share their knowledge with you today. For those of you on YouTube who have not been with us before, the way this works for the YouTube audiences, you can ask your questions in the little box on the side. If you look over there, one of my colleagues will reload those questions to me, and I will try and weave them into this first hour of the discussion. For everyone who's here as part of the MedTech Innovator Accelerator cohort, you get to ask your questions live in the Q&A at the end of this first hour. So we'll have our private Q&A for 30 minutes with our cohort companies. So for anyone who's watching on YouTube again, please go ahead and queue up your questions as we talk, and I'll try to get to them. All right, so with that, let me introduce our 3 panelists for today. First off, we're going to introduce Srikanth Iyer he's the Strategy and Business Development Director, Connected Health for Irdeto. Irdeto has been a partner MedTech Innovator for a couple of years now. We've been lucky to work with them and learn a lot of things. So let's hear from Srikanth a little bit about himself and about Irdeto and what you do for the company.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's always a pleasure to join a MedTech Innovator webinar live. Thank you, Frederick, for the invitation. And yeah, so about myself, my name is Srikanth. I'm a biomedical engineer by training. I also happen to come from Singapore. I'm based right now in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, so it's pretty early morning for me right now. And I've been in the medical devices industry for the last 13, 14 years now, working across the public and private sector. Especially working for medical devices companies, multinational companies like GE Healthcare, as well as also working for regulatory agencies, especially in Singapore, the Health Sciences Authority under the Ministry of Health. So I happen to understand the regulatory side as well as commercial side. And at Irdeto, what I look after is strategy and building together how a medical device startup or a big organization can infuse cybersecurity technologies into the device, early stage design stage of medical device, and continue it throughout the product life cycle. So we provide security technologies, and we've been around for the last 50 years. So I'm looking forward to a wonderful discussion over medical device cybersecurity and listening to the panelists. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Shrikant. So looking forward to getting into some of these questions with you. And thank you for being here at such a crazy hour for you. So I appreciate that. All right, next up, we're going to go to Adam Chi, Dr. Adam Chi, who is the Chief of Smart Health Leadership Center for the Institute of System Science at the NUS, National University of Singapore. Adam, tell us about yourself.
Right, thanks, Paul. So my name's Adam. I'm currently serving as the Chief for the Smart Health Leadership Center over at Institute of System Science, NUS. We are a practice-oriented institute, so we deliver training, practice-based education, training, and mentorship consulting, predominantly to governments, hospitals, and of course, at times, private solution providers. And our main mission is actually to transform the future of healthcare through the usage of data, technology, and design. So very happy to be here today to talk about cybersecurity for MedTech. This is a topic that has been close to my heart, if you will. I've been talking about it, the need for it for at least 15 years. So yeah, very happy to be here. Looking forward.
Well, I'm glad that it's finally caught up with you. So thank you for being here with us. Now, our third expert for today, Rahul Gupta, Global Business Manager, Cybersecurity Assurance Program, Identity Management and Security Division at UL. So Rahul, you want to tell us about yourself and what you do at UL?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where are you presently. So I am Rahul Gupta, working in UL as Global Business Manager for Cybersecurity Assurance Program. We call it CAP program in Identity Management and Security Division. So my role is a global role, but we have large focus on APAC market also. And my key responsibilities are managing P&L and business growth in cybersecurity. We call it related to connected technologies and devices. So in today's world, everything is connected. So primarily in my domain, we are addressing cybersecurity related to Industry 4.0, covering industrial operation technologies, industrial IoT. Then, of course, medical is one of the important segment for us, and then smart automotive. So broadly, we define these segments as smart automotive, then smart healthcare, smart industry, smart building, smart home. So these are the 5 key segments. I take care of like cybersecurity requirements and particularly the clients coming from these segments. And as I mentioned, these segments are related to all connected things. So among them, smart healthcare is our key focus. I have total 30 years of experience in a wide range of industrial and manufacturing sectors, particularly in automation and control field, from safety, functional safety to cybersecurity related to operation technologies. And in the current role, like as I mentioned, I'm responsible for developing the cybersecurity strategies, then keeping it track of the current trends, like for next 5 years, where are we seeing this connected technology or connected device market, and what are the upcoming new technologies, what will be the key challenges. And of course, smart healthcare is one of our focus area. And in this area, we'll be discussing more during this presentation or this panel discussion. But our key focus is on medical device cybersecurity. UL has one standard called UL 2900, is aggregated by many international organizations and as a reference standard in many regulatory bodies. And then another focus area is hospital or healthcare cybersecurity. And briefly about UL, it's very old company, 125-year-old company. Our headquarters is in US, But at present, I am based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and I have plans to relocate to some other location once this COVID-19 situation is managed. And we have more than 500 security experts in our group, and we have published 25 plus cybersecurity standards and framework. And we are independent market leader. And then it's all cybersecurity. When we talk about cybersecurity, so we offer end-to-end solutions like consulting, advisory, gap analysis, training, testing, certification, audit, assessments. Yeah. So looking forward for this panel discussion and share some of our experience that how you can benefit and what are the current challenges we see from the clients, and and sharing information. Yeah. Thanks.
Hey, thank you for the three intros there. Thank you, Rahul. So let's start off and just kind of get one thing out of the way here, which is this a global thing that can be looked at globally? Meaning that for cybersecurity, for all these companies, some of these companies want to access just the U.S. market, but most of them want to access the U.S. market and the European market, Asia Pacific, and other markets. I know globally, obviously, cybersecurity is becoming an issue everywhere. So is there a way we can tackle this at a global level? Like, are there standards in all these different regions? I'm going to start off with Srikanth on this.
Thank you, Paul. Rahul, thanks for the kind introduction. You actually covered a lot of grounds there on standards. Coming to medical devices itself, right? There is impetus. There are regulatory agencies, and there are also standard forums for International Medical Device Regulatory Forum. It's nice, IMDRF. What is happening in the world right now is because of connected devices. Cybersecurity is not a bolt-on, add-on, simple service that can be included at any time. And this regulatory agencies, as well as medical device manufacturers and also hospitals, are realizing. So it should start at an early stage. So to answer your question, there is an impetus right now. Standards are globally sort of coming together, but every jurisdiction has its own sort of flavor to it, to put it in a simple way. But if you look at basic medical device regulation, cybersecurity is catching up in terms of the pre-market side. Post-market side is already up in place. We can get into the details specifically, but I'll say in the coming years, US FDA, of course, leading it. Singapore HSA has a very, very good guidance document out there. So any startups in Singapore, please look at those guidance documents. Those are state of the art, and there are a lot of requirements out there, but it'll take some more time for the industry and for the agencies to catch up, as the industry is going at a very, very breathtaking speed, especially due to COVID and digital health innovation.
Thanks. And Rahul, you mentioned even in your intro, the UL 2900 standard, which I think is 2902-1, I think at this point. But I'm just curious, so at UL, you've come up with this standard. Are you the only entity that is testing and certifying medtech companies for that standard? Is that something that you're the one place to go to for that?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. It's a good question. And maybe before jumping on that one, maybe I'll continue with your previous question that will set some background, like sure. Why this medical device cybersecurity is an issue of global concern. So mainly, like as Srikanth mentioned, like any startup company, when they are like working in medical or healthcare device development, so it's very important to understand, like when they develop these devices, where they want to export, like where is their market. So there are no like fine line. So it's better to understand the global perspective when these things are developed. And since we are discussing more about cybersecurity, so medical device cybersecurity is an issue of global concern. And the important is security. Why? So security incidents can threaten the safety of patients in the healthcare system across the world by causing diagnostic or therapeutic errors, by compromising the safe performance of a device, and by affecting the clinical operations or by denying patient access to the critical care. So cybersecurity efforts are necessary to ensure that patient safety is maintained while encouraging innovation and allowing timely patient access to safe and effective devices. So yes, we have to continue with the innovation, developing new technology, but we have to be focus on developing safe and effective medical devices. And therefore, this cybersecurity is important. And there are many regulations across the globe, as Shrikant mentioned, to address the concern of medical device cybersecurity. So the question is what these regulator expecting in terms of cybersecurity for medical device. So this is where I will address this UL 2900 link. So regulator expect that all stakeholders are encouraged to harmonize their approach to cybersecurity across the entire life cycle of the medical device. So that's very important. And anyone is developing any product, so has to consider the whole life cycle of the product. As Shrikant mentioned, pre-market, post-market guidance documents are available. So it's not about just developing the product in the lab or in factory, but understanding the whole life cycle of the product related to healthcare. So this includes harmonization across product design, risk management activities throughout the device life cycle, then device labeling, regulatory submission requirements, pre-market, post-market, then information sharing, and particularly into the post-market activities. So, and as Shrikant mentioned, so a lot of new regulations are coming up. So in European Commission has adopted 2 new regulations recently, the MDR, Medical Device Regulation, and the In Vitro Diagnostic Medical Device Regulation, IVDR, to bring EU legislation up to the date and medical advances to ensure better protection of the public health and patient safety. And US FDA regulations already in place. So all these regulations or the guidance document, when we refer from the various countries, including Australia, TGA, Canada, Health Association, and even in Singapore. So many of these country guidance document for cybersecurity do refer UL 2900 as a reference standard for testing the medical device. So this is the link. So this UL 2900 is a standard which probably I will cover up in more details in the upcoming discussions. But yes, this is where I can explain the link between regulatory requirement and how does this UL 2900 fits in that bracket. Yeah. Over to you, Paul.
All right, great. Thank you. So, and we will get more into UL 2900 in a little bit, but the key here is that it's a regulatory requirement now as well. So it's not just having your device approved for safety and efficacy. UL 2900 and cybersecurity is now a key focus for the FDA and for other agencies around the world. It's this, we're hopefully going to be harmonizing, and I think so. The key that people can take away just for the moment, for right now, is that you can just go online and read a little bit about UL 2900 and just know that there's some guidance there that you should be looking at if you're not familiar with what we're talking about at all. So we'll come back to some of those standards in a little bit. Adam, I want to talk to you for a minute about just the clinical side of this. So, we've been talking a little bit again about cybersecurity, and I don't think we're really kind of hitting yet on what's the real threat that we're talking about here. So, from your perspective, how do we assess the vulnerabilities and the threats in terms of clinical risk and the impact on patient safety?
Well, there's a lot of questions in one question, so I'm going to take it apart and try to answer them. So in terms of risk, that is for sure huge implication, but it also depends on the actual clinical practice. So if you're in a GP clinic assessing chronic disease patients, of course, there's going to be some risk, but the patient's not going to die immediately, hopefully, from such an attack. But let's say you're actually performing surgical operations, and depending on the systems, and it actually goes down, then you can imagine the horrors, because you may be using, in this day and age, with smart healthcare devices, you may be using an AI-guided system. And if that goes down, surgeons may be taken aback, and it depends on the level of expertise and reliance on the system. So you can see the magnitude, it really differs. But in general, yes, this is something that shouldn't even be allowed to exist in the first place. It's like, if you switch the context, how important is electricity in a hospital setting? And then immediately you have the answer. Are you kidding me? It should be there always. There's no question. Yeah.
So thank you for that. And Rahul, you want to weigh in?
Yes. So thanks, Adam, to bring your view, and really appreciate, this is really concern in for patient healthcare point of view. And many times we see clients coming from healthcare facility and see okay, medical device is important for them, and why this what are the cybersecurity consideration they should take from patient care point of view. So the reason is we are using now several technologies and connectivity scenario, particularly in IoT, where we Internet of Things applications. So cybersecurity threats in healthcare are not only caused by vulnerability of the network medical device, but another risk is the poorly protected IT networks of healthcare facility, typically in hospitals. So these are two important elements. Okay, medical device cybersecurity, you can design, protect, but important is when you connect to the IT networks in hospital, what happens? So many of any product development, many of these regulatory bodies guidelines document are addressing this issue, that when you are designing medical device, you have to ensure that when they get connected to this IT networks in a hospital, they stay protected. And the good example is WannaCry ransomware attack is one example. Their medical devices were infected and deactivated by malware and cybersecurity threats. So this had fatal consequences for the affected healthcare facilities and the patient. So the attackers targets explicitly the medical device, either to gain access to the information contained in the device or to interfere with the device operation. So this is another angle that how important is from patient care point of view that cybersecurity is addressed in a overall view. When we are talking about healthcare facilities. Thanks, Paul. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And Adam.
Yeah, I'd like to add on. So Rahul has kindly alluded to the fact that the underlying IT networks plays an important part. I'd just like to go a little bit further. How we assess it is we do not take things in episode. So things like human policies, anything that touches human care, human, because in a sense, if using patient is a wrong term sometimes. These people could be healthy and coming in to the hospital, case in point, pregnancy. They're not sick, they're just pregnant. So, we actually have to look at multiple aspects of things, not just the network, the medical devices, the human policies. And a lot of times you'd be surprised, it is not a technical issue when there's a cybersecurity attack, it's a human issue. So that's something I thought would be very important. You might think that, hey, this has nothing to do with MedTech devices. It actually has. So case in point, and I'm not going to go too deep, let's say there's a USB outlet in your ultrasound machine that should be disabled by default. These are stuff that you have to think of, because the human will like, oh, there's a USB slot. What's the logical thing to do? Insert the USB drive. So, stuff to think about when you design your solutions. Yep.
Good point on the USB drives. One of the key areas for attack. Shrikant.
Yeah, I think Adam brought out one critical point: humans, because humans are actually, in fact, the most important vector of attacks as well. And on a normal day right now, devices are getting more and more connected, right? And a lot of those devices were designed at a very earlier stage. These are legacy systems, and they were not supposed to be connected. So those are the easiest one to exploit. They have design vulnerabilities, patient vulnerabilities and stuff. And the most important part here is we need to understand the clinical context where exactly anything has happened. And for a layman, why are we talking about attack in the first place? because each of these, why would any cybersecurity gang, ransomware gang, or anybody attack, is because there is a lot of patient data here. So we are talking about assets which are in real life terms, business terms, these can be exploited. And at the end of the day, healthcare records are the ones which are very, very valuable. And so in darknet and stuff, these are very valuable. So these are the bigger context, but how a medical device is connected and how these are in a hospital network, the hospital network, IT, cybersecurity, segmentation, how can a medical device startup or company protect their devices? These are the different topics, and how do they go about it, how the regulations come in play. These are the topics we need to discuss and probably give some guidance to the startups out here.
Yep, for sure. And I know, all right, Rahul, back to you, and then we'll move on to another topic. Yeah, Rahul.
Yeah, just to quickly this inputs from Adam and Shrikant, very good inputs. So generally we summarize that cybersecurity for anything like any connected device or any system. So three critical components: people, process, and technology. So Adam brought a topic of people. So yes, we should have the policies or procedures to handle how people work or react in our facilities. Then we should have the processes, people, process, and technology. So these three things are critical. Yeah. Thanks, Paul.
Yep. All right. So let's talk, let's get a little more specific again about just medical devices, because I know there's lots of other, issues and things that we're bringing up here that have to do with, systems and policies and things at the health provider. We had one good example from Adam before about, just not having your USB, enabled by default. It should be disabled by default. Little things like that. What are some of the things that that medical device companies should be coming prepared with in terms of, oh, look, they can show the potential customer that they have thought through cybersecurity. They've got some of these things covered, not just thinking it through, but they've done certain things. So what are some of those things? What are some of the key things that a company should be doing? And again, I know there's some guidelines and things online which we can point people to later, but I'm talking more as a practical nature. What are some of the things perhaps that people aren't thinking about that will come to trip them up or their clients later, or leave them vulnerable? Again, just give some specific examples perhaps of things that you recommend to people that they go, oh, I didn't even think about that. That could cause, by the way, huge delays later, or for them not to get customers. So whoever wants to take a shot at that, who wants to go first? Adam, why don't we start with you?
More than happy to. So I've actually encountered this problem across the globe. I used to work with the Middle East counterparts, Asia counterparts, and there's no cookie cutter solution. That's important to take note. So MedTech companies out there, if today you're thinking that I can take something, slap it on my, one proven formula, that's already a big mistake. So you must be mindful. Of course, there are guidelines. The second problem is, which is related to the first point, is because there's different levels of maturity across different settings. So even if you go to somewhere like Singapore, some institutes are a little bit more lax, not because the policy allows it, but because they are not sure. Some are a little bit more restrictive. So you must be also mindful when you go in and someone says it's actually okay, double check, because you signed a contract. It's your duty to know the regulations in that country. In terms of preparing your solutions to be secure, do your best, but have room for flexibility. It shouldn't be a system where the local engineers have no clue how to operate. And you see that in a lot of situations, tech support is only available in HQ. So you might think that, that's really not a meta issue. It is, because when hospitals are buying that solution, they don't really care that it's made in Holland or whatever they talk to you. It's your branding. And do learn more about cybersecurity, because it is such a dynamic domain. And many times you feel that, so I'm going to use some examples. I'll do it quickly. So if you talk about something like an ultrasound machine, which I like to use, they are embedded systems. they are difficult to update. Once you update them, the software has to be vetted by FDA, and that's fine in the traditional manner. But a lot of the times these days, these solutions, these ultrasound machines, they are Windows-based. Windows will have patches, and that sort of like have a conflict with each other. So what are you going to do? Are you going to patch the Windows bugs, which is going to come every other month? Or what is your mitigation strategy? You will require downtime, you require patching and whatever you. So you have to factor that into consideration, as opposed to telling the IT guys, look, it's going to go on your network, so it's your problem now. It's not going to work that way. And there's other solutions like CT machines, and this is generalizing just to show you the types of categories. The actual CT machine doesn't connect to the network. There's a workstation involved. And if that's the case, it's no longer a MedTech solution to the hospital. When you're selling it, you say it's part of the CT machine, it's part of the MRI machine, it's part of the CR machine, it's a MedTech devices, I follow regulatory guidelines. You're connecting a computer to the hospital network. That's a computer. That's full-fledged cybersecurity right there. So you have to factor in flexibility and have the manpower expertise. And I think the flexibility part is more important, because I've come across so many setups when it says, I can't modify the software, I can't install anything. And that's dead in the water. It may work well in year 1 or 2, but that's bad design. Yeah. So that's what I'd like to share with the audience. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you, Adam, for that. Something that, you made me think of was something I'd read about earlier today, which is that FDA now is starting to push for, US FDA is starting to push for companies having a software bill of materials, basically, of documenting these are all the software components that my system uses, and our process for patching and updating those things so that they can be updated in the future. And again, it's not something that's being regulated yet in that way, but it's coming, right? So this is an example, as I was saying before, that companies need to be prepared to do that. Like they have to have that software bill of materials so they can actually explain to people, right?
The irony is it's a common problem that's going around. So if you work on the ground in hospitals, everybody knows that the machine is not patched. But if you ask them, so what's the solution? And you see all the fingers starting pointing. So everyone say, oh, it's a network device. Go talk to IT. Go talk to MedTech. So yeah, it's a little bit messy. But yeah, you're right. We're getting there. But still, in the interim, it is a valid problem. Yeah.
So, there was a question in the Q&A here, and then I'll come back to you, Rahul, in a second. But there was a question in the Q&A that's kind of related to this, because we brought it up before about these legacy systems that are out there. And there was a question about, plausible avenues for capacity building for legacy systems. So what can we do? What can be done to patch, to help the legacy systems out there, just as a general topic. Anyone have any comments on that?
I can go in first, actually. So the
sure.
legacy system for cybersecurity is a big topic out here, and how it is being addressed is it's a shared responsibility. That's how the regulators as well as the industry is also portraying. So you would have to make sure that, like Adam mentioned, the hospital, which is the actual healthcare delivery organization, takes care of some part of it, and the manufacturers are responsible for updating it. Unfortunately, some of these systems go back so many years that in many countries, suppose a X-ray machine is used for, I think, 15 years. By regulation, they're supposed to use for 7 years, and maybe they can be refurbished further. So the operating system gets outdated. It cannot be physically updated. So there's compatibility wise, there is absolutely no way you can do anything. So those systems, probably we take it offline. So the hospital has a security program in place, and probably also manufacturers can make sure that, like IT companies do, you sort of make sure your software is sort of future proof for updates. So that is something industry is also taking care of. And probably I can jump into SBOM and other stuff which is coming up a lot, but I think legacy is a challenging problem.
Thanks. And Rahul, you had your hand up before to comment on the earlier question. Did you want to do that?
Yeah. So yeah, I'll connect both, like the earlier question and this legacy systems. So Adam brought up a really good point, like the how these medical devices, some of these like X-ray machines, CT machines getting connected. So broadly, what we have seen like a new trend in the like in other industrial space anyway, we are doing it, but in healthcare, there is a growing trend and need. So broadly, if we define like a healthcare facility, they have medical devices. Either they are connected to the IT networks of independent, maybe an independent workstation. Then they have IT networks handling the like routine medical reports or the data related to patients and all. Then most important is we call it operation technology or OT networks. So this is something new concept which has been adopted from industry 4.0 or other critical infrastructure industry like power, chemical, transportation, which are critical in the nature. So when we say OT networks, so what are OT networks is basically like in a healthcare facility, uh, like medical devices are important, patient data is the IT networks are important, but equally important that air condition is working, oxygen supply is maintained, the power supply availability in case of emergency, like say operation theater, and suddenly there is a like shutdown of power supply due to cyber attack. So I'm talking about like these things can be like manipulated by a cyber attack, and there are incidents happening across the world, and we see we keep a track like on regular basis. So critical infrastructure and even in healthcare, it has happened that due to cyber attack, the emergency power supply was stripped. So what happens then is definitely a threat to the patient life. So a lot of standards are there, and to correlate and do the segmentation of IT network, OT networks within hospitals to address these critical infrastructure facilities like power supply, water supply, oxygen supply, and all. And then, of course, medical device. So if you put together these three things, so it's very important. So not only for the new facility, but as Shrikant, you mentioned about legacy system, it's very important to evaluate those. What are the current facilities, do the segmentation, and there are now guidelines, standards available can actually address the cybersecurity requirements related to these things. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, no, thank you, Rahul. So Srikanth, let me go back to you for a moment and say, so if someone's working with you as a client, and they're a smaller company, they're at an early stage, they've got their device, it is connected, so it is going to be receiving and transmitting data. It's going to be on networks. What's the right process then for that company? And at what stage do they figure out their cybersecurity and risk strategy and implement that? So at what stage would they work with you, and just kind of walk us through that process?
All right, so that's a very good question. Let me just put this in context here. So every organization needs to look at few cybersecurity hygiene questions, one at an organizational level, another at a regulated product level. Organizational level would be more like your cybersecurity hygiene assessment, your IT networks, looking at your advisory services, the typical IT systems you use in your manufacturing or your software development stuff. And now when you go into the product level, that's where you look at, okay, how do I start to think about what my end customer as well as the regulator is looking for? So what are they looking for? They're basically looking at, okay, have you considered these kind of threat vectors for your particular device, and how can you look at it? So there is this big term in the US FDA in the industry, which is threat modeling. It's a very old practice which was in place, but for medical devices, it's a little bit new because regulators wouldn't ask this question. So try to understand, okay, what are the different threat vectors? If your device is not available for patient care, it's a safety issue. So security is not just mandatory, it is also linked to patient safety. And that's when regulatory guidances come in. So you need to understand that, okay, how do I make sure that the threats are identified, so I can sort of map each of these threats, do a threat modeling. So if you're not able to have in-house expertise, seek out to security organizations. So Ideto is one of them. So we do threat assessments, landscape modeling, so threat modeling, figuring out, okay, my Bluetooth connection is not active right now. How do I understand this? Start by looking at security risk assessment. When you do your 14971 risk management, try to implement security risk assessment as well. There are guidances, documents which map out what you should do at each stage. And then once you go inside, you start with, okay, how is my architecture? Is after you do your security risk assessment, get down into, okay, looking at your architecture, try and see, okay, can I do some kind of testing services in place? How do I actually prove to the agencies that I have looked at all these possibilities and I have sort of seen, okay, these are the requirements, and it's a life cycle process, right? You don't just fix one thing at a time. You have to look at, okay, throughout the device life cycle. So when we say, okay, some regulatory terms here, pre-market, you mentioned about software bill of materials. What are the ingredients which goes inside my medical device? Do I have third-party operating systems? Do I have third-party firmwares inside? Do I have any strategy to map out how those will be updated? Have you documented each of those? What are the risks if this is not updated? What happens if this goes into a clinical systems? There are some integrations, your device is connected to some other major device. What happens if your device fails? What happens if the patient at the therapy is going on? Suppose a drug eluting stent is active, and there is a ransomware because of incorrect medical dosage. There is some attack happening. Is your device itself being controlled by somebody else? That's an integrity question. Then you have same question on availability. Then you have same question on configuration. So this whole thing of confidentiality, integrity, availability in cybersecurity for the IT network, like IT technologies and OT world, it's a little different. You talk about availability first. If your device is not available, what happens? Patient's life is at risk. Clinical delivery is not given to patients. So those are the stuff you need to look at. So at a high level, start to look at security risk assessment. Take it seriously, not just doing your medical device risk. Understand, okay, what are the defense, and once you get a little deeper, what are the technologies available to protect your device in depth from the design stage. And then for post market, try to continue to manage your device through the life cycle. Identify if there's any vulnerability issued against any third party OS, third party firmware. Am I able to map it back to my particular device throughout the life cycle? How do I update it? Go back and update your threat risk management again, redo the threat modeling. So these are the expectations which industry has to follow from a regulatory perspective. And as this is evolving, new standards come in, like where Rahul mentioned about CAP standard. There's specific guidances available. Keep it simple, start with the patient and then go in the periphery. That's the overall message.
Thank you for that. So let me come back to Adam here for a second again. So Adam, when someone's marketing to an institution, it seems to me that being able to communicate the cybersecurity strategy is a differentiator, perhaps, for a company. If the organization is weighing a couple of different solutions and they're saying, "Hey, we could use this or this or this to solve our problem," the actual, the cybersecurity component is pretty important these days. So, is that something? Is that strategically something that companies can do to, how do they do that? I guess is my point. How should they come in if they're communicating with, somebody on the, the IT side or the chief medical information officer, whoever it might be in an organization? What should they do in terms of communicating their cybersecurity strategy?
That again is a couple of questions. So let me tear it down. So it really depends on what you're selling. If you're selling like one individual small piece unit, it almost never gets attention. So that will be treated as hygiene requirements. Do you meet certain specifications, and you can get away with it? If it's a, let's say, large-scale investment, then yes, more scrutiny would be placed onto the solution. And this would be, again, due to the diversity of the region, the level of maturity. Right now, you can get away with saying that we can do this, we may be able to do this, or sometimes, I don't know, let's figure this out. You may even be able to get away with that in Singapore as of today. But there will be a time when standards and specifications are produced and adopted to a reasonable level of demand, and then there'll be a game changer. It is either you meet the requirements or you don't. Simple as that. So right now, there's still some gray areas because of the complexity, not in how to handle it. We don't know how to handle it. The problem is there's no official policy. So some of the institutes I work with, they develop their own industrial certification and guidelines are only the baseline. Because some of these, and I've worked with you with the Singapore Health Standards Committee, because I serve as the chair for the ESG committee, they only address it at the device level. So how about your communication level, et cetera, et cetera. So it really is contextual, but the answer that the general scheme is, yes, it is important. You may be able to get away with it right now, but it will be a time where it comes in, it's very simple. Do you meet requirements or not? If you don't, you're out. Yeah.
And we talked about this a little before, so I'm going to go back to Rahul on this. The idea of harmonization of these standards becoming practice in different countries in different regions. So is there harmonization? Is it happening, Rahul? And others can chime in on this as well.
Yeah. So just going back on our when we started discussing. So this UL standards like 2900 series, basically we have UL 2900-1, which give the general requirements for any network connectable device. And these standards are related to software testing. Then there is another series 2-1, 2900-2-1, and that is specifically related for healthcare facility. So these are like testing standards for software used for medical devices. And these standards are consensus standard referred by various regulatory bodies. So means device manufacturers who need to get the clearance or approval of submission from these regulatory body often have a strong interest in these ULS standards. So what does it mean? That it's not mandated by any regulatory body that you should do the testing, and testing is fine, means is consensus standard, but certification is not mandatory. So at this point, I just would like to clarify to the large audience that certification is not mandated by regulatory. So this is where the consensus has not reached, like what that certification should be. But as I mentioned, we have seen most of the large medical device manufacturer, including many startup companies, are looking at UL 2900 for testing and getting certified. So of course, there is a difference between doing testing and get the evaluation report and certification. So that is probably we can cover separately, but yeah. So consensus is important, but at present the consensus is like globally efforts are to have a regulatory body consensus. So as of now, like we have US FDA, EU MDR, then each countries are having those regulatory or guidance document, but there is not a global document available. So yes, if anyone is planning to export to the different region, they have to really look into these documents, requirements, and see what are the differences. But definitely, like in UL, this is what we do as part of gap analysis. Like what are the gaps between any device evaluated against US FDA, then how what are the changes needed to meet the requirement of EU MDR or Australia TGA, something like that. Yeah. So so I hope I have answered your question. Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, no, that's definitely very helpful. Thank you very much, Rahul. So we've got about 10 minutes left in the main public broadcast. So I want a couple other things here. So one of those is, kind of coming back again to this idea of, working with small companies at early stages. I want to go back and just kind of, get a general assessment as you mentioned before. If you don't have this expertise in-house, you need to work with a third party who has that expertise. Is this really expensive to do this at that early stage? Like, what kind of investment would be involved in putting together all that kind of threat assessment, all the things that we were talking about a little earlier? So Srikanth, let me just kind of get from you, just generally speaking, what does this look like? I'm putting you on the spot. In terms of a budget, like not what is your cost for doing this, but generally speaking, what should a company be thinking about in terms of a cost center for cybersecurity? And is that something they can really do in-house, practically speaking, or do they really need an outside vendor?
All right, so that's a loaded question, Paul. But just to put this in context, right? Like I said, security is critical component. It's not an afterthought. And then selecting a right partner who understands the regulatory environment, markets you plan to work in, assess your risk, provide you with resources and stuff, and understand your problems. So let's take a step back and understand, okay, what exactly are we talking here, right? In a medical device, once you get a product to market, what are we talking about? We're talking about process, and we're talking about product. When you say process, you're talking about, okay, how the device is manufactured. So you have a QMS process. Has the startup, you have to ask this question. The startup has to ask this question: can you integrate cybersecurity into your QMS? Can you establish records to say, okay, in terms of cybersecurity, I have documented procedures and process to do X, Y, Z. Is my password safe? Do I have file integrity? Do I have authentication? Do I have verification? Those are the questions. There's a list of questions. We go into details out here. And then, okay, say, how do I do it? If I need any help, can I reach out to somebody? Can I reach out to a company which has, say, a platform, a pre-market platform, post-market platform? Do they have a software bill of materials, services? These are all coming up. So threat modeling is right now not required. It's coming up. It's a requirement which will come up in future. Now, again, going back to software bill of material, there's a couple of standards out here, but is the company having such resources in place in-house? And then also trying to understand, okay, once I create my product, do I have sufficient software development processes in place where I can look at cybersecurity component specifically? Do I have in-house resources? Do I want to invest in an experienced cybersecurity person so that I can inbuild this internally into my company? If that's a question, because it's a big question which the company has to answer. In terms of product pipeline, product timeline, it takes more than a couple of years from product planning to actually having the device in the market. And typically it's anything between 2 to 4 years. Under 2 years, it's very tight. In fact, we work with some of the startups in MedTech Innovator in APAC as well, and it's a long road. So investing at the right time, at the design stage, with a trusted cybersecurity partner, it's a subjective question. Again, it's very contextual. Which market you're going in? Are you going in Singapore? Are you going in Europe? Are you going in US? Are you going in Australia? Requirements vary a little bit. 80-90% are the same. It's just the flavor, the local regulation, as well as the hospital. You have the clinical requirements which you need to make sure you follow through. So these are all contexts which you need to put in. And price, again, is very subjective, right? In Asia and India, the prices are different. Singapore is different. US is different. I'm in Amsterdam right now. In Europe, it's completely different, right? I'm a Singaporean, so I understand how it works, right? So it's very subjective question. But look, for startups, I would say start to plan and cybersecurity into your design processes, in QMS, in your risk management, in software development at an early stage. Think about threat modeling, software bill of material. These are the two key words if you have not thought about it.
Thank you very much on that. All right. So again, we're getting close to the end of the first hour here. We got 5 more minutes. I know there's a bunch of questions the companies in our cohort are queuing up. So I want to wrap up this first hour here, giving each of you a chance just to reflect on the conversation and think about what are the things that we didn't cover that you want to make sure people know and they're thinking about when they leave this conversation today and they go, wow, it was something that I could really take away. Give us a takeaway from each of you. So I'm going to start off with you, Adam, on this. Give us, some of your takeaways, things that you want to make sure companies are thinking about. And also, if people want to get in touch with you, how should they find you? Is that on LinkedIn or somewhere else? So let's start off.
Second question is easy. Just look me up on LinkedIn or just Google my name. You'll find me. So when my advice to MedTech companies is that when you present a solution to a healthcare enterprise, don't focus on your selling points on how secure your MedTech device is. Also go above and say, how does it actually works well in the grand scheme of things? So because it's not a standalone system, it's going to be connected to the hospital's networks. It could be dedicated networks, it could be not, but you must actually present a viable solution. So because there may be limitations, or not on your end, on their end, or it could be a situation because the 2 + 2 together, it ends up having limitations or contextual disadvantage. So you must be able to articulate that. If not, they'll have some potential issues because the solution could be good and there could be a remedy. It's just that you don't know how to articulate that. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Adam, for that advice. Let me go next to Rahul, to you. So, takeaways, thoughts, things you want to share with people. Make sure they look up, whatever it might be.
Yeah. So, mainly for startup companies or device manufacturers. So I would just like to add that key ask is patient and healthcare providers should be able to trust the medical devices they use. So that's important. So the most effective way to ensure trust all around is for health device manufacturers to adopt a secure DLC, means approach to product development. That's very important. So life cycle concept, as Shrikant did also mention, and maybe can use some of the standards available for cyber hygiene for security evaluations, particularly for network connectable healthcare products and systems. And when we talk about connectable components, are products and software that can be connected via like physical, wireless, cellular, or other transmission means to another components. And what happens is while regarding investment on following this life cycle approach. So what we have seen, some of the device manufacturers, when they come for these testing certification, when these products are ready for launch in marketplace, which is actually quite late. So if you see the pre-investment, that can save a lot, because any deficiencies found, any gap analysis finding can be incorporated in the product development life cycle in early stages, rather than when you are ready to launch in the market and you find, oh, these things are missing. And so it's very important to get engaged with the testing or certification bodies. So this helps, this reduce the go-to-market or launch life cycle. And they do the proper assessment of documentation, then authentication, authorization, access control, cryptography, remote communication, risk management processes, known vulnerability testing, malware testing, malformed input testing, source code analysis, organization processes, and most importantly, the structured penetration testing in the product. So all these benefits comes at early stage. So that's my final words here.
So, well, actually, let me clarify or ask you to clarify one thing, Rahul. So at what point in the life cycle should a company come to UL?
So actually, we do support the product life cycle. So when their product product development life cycle, when they have a basic product design is ready, and so that is the right stage. So what we are trying to say, when they see the basic concept of the process product design is ready, so is the right time to start engaging, instead of when product is ready or version 5 and ready to launch in the market. So the earlier the better, I would say.
Earlier the better. I like that. Okay. Yeah. Shrikant, you get the final word.
Thank you, Paul. So my key message here is no one is immune to cyber attack. Absolutely no one. Everybody has to, there's always a risk. It's all threat, risk. All these are, probability. The ideal time, the question for you, Paul, is the ideal time to incorporate any cybersecurity consideration for a new product is at the design stage, when you have no controls at the beginning of the product lifecycle. Start to think security by design at the development stage. The key challenge is first do security risk assessment. Any startup listening here, they have not done absolutely anything. Start to do security risk assessment. Start to do this. Should happen during the prototype stage. You should do some, try and see, do an exercise, do a threat modeling, security architecture review, try and figure out, okay, what do I need to do? Don't worry, you're not alone. Even the big companies are just getting started. It's just been a couple of years. Big manufacturers have a little bit of advantage. They have bigger teams. If you want to get advantage, cybersecurity is a competitive advantage moving forward. So if you want to have a level playing field, that's where Ideto comes in. We help startups meet the cybersecurity requirements and regulatory standards as it's for the big manufacturers. So we try and make the level playing field. We want to tell people that please incorporate, please reach out for help, because once you submit for your pre-market in the US or even in the EU in MDR, even in Singapore moving forward, you need to have cybersecurity as a safety consideration. It's not just nuts and bolts. It's not just prerequisite. It's not just an add-on requirement. It's a prerequisite. Make sure your solution is secure. It's easy, secure, trustworthy. At the end of the day, digitalization and cybersecurity goes hand in hand. So prevention is better than prevent and prepare than repent and repair.
I like it. I like it. That's a good conclusion for all of us. All right. So we covered a lot. We also have a lot of things we didn't even get to cover. So we're going to get to do some of that in this next 30 minutes with the closed discussion with our cohort. But I really want to thank the panelists for just a huge topic here that we tried to dig into on a number of levels, and I really appreciate that. For those of you who are here on YouTube watching, as Frederick mentioned, we have one more webinar next week. So please go to medtechinnovator.org/APAC live for more information on that. You can still subscribe. You can look at the archive of all of the past sessions that we've had. This is our 9th, so we've got 8 great previous ones for you to go look at. So I encourage you to do that. We have a lot more coming up. We have our showcase for all the companies in our cohort soon. We'll be having a competition where these companies are competing for hundreds of thousands of dollars in awards that you can be part of. So lots of things to look into. Please come back and join us. Thanks for being here today. And again, thanks to the panelists. All of them will put their contact information, at least how to find them on LinkedIn or other places, into the YouTube comments, so we make sure that you're able to find these great panelists. So again, Srikanth, Adam, Rahul, thank you for your time today. Hope you guys enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers. So I'm going to wrap up the YouTube